Okay, so this is going to be a quick video to help you with your completing the square. There's lots of different ways to do this. I'm going to show you what I have found to be, in my opinion, the easiest way. Now, the first thing is you want to make sure that you have all three of your quadratic terms on this side. Sometimes it's equal to a y or an f of x, or that might even be a 0, and that's okay. You do want that to be one of those three things. You need an x squared term, you need a middle x term, and then you need a constant term at the back. Now, the first thing that I always have my students do is just move the constant over. Just scoot it over. We're not doing anything mathematically, we're just making a little room. After they make room, we check to make sure that the number in front of the x squared is a 1, and if it's invisible, it's definitely a 1, so we're good to go. And once you do that, guys, now you just have to fill in the missing term here. Now I'm going to put a box here, and I'm going to put a box back here, because whatever we do inside of this box, we're going to do the same thing back here. Okay, so how does this work? Well, you take your middle term here, it's called the B term. It's like this is your A, this is your B, this is your C. So you take your B term and you cut it in half, and then you square it. Okay, so inside that box we're going to take B, cut it in half, and square it. So what is 4 divided by 2? Well, that is 2. And then what is 2 squared? Well, that's a 4. Now, it's always going to be positive, because when you square a number, it's always positive. And then whatever you just did in this box, you're going to do back here in this box. The only kicker is that in front of this, you actually need a minus sign. And the reason, or what some people do is they just think of it as, okay, whatever I've added to the problem here, I need to do the opposite back here. So it's usually just a subtraction sign. And that's so that you're balancing out the equation. It's not legal to just add a number unless you subtract it in the same sentence, okay? All right, so once you're done with this, you're going to factor this down. And when you factor this down, guys, it is always going to be just your x and then half of whatever that b was. So whenever you do b over 2, half of negative 4 is a negative 2. That's what goes here, and we need a little squared. So our factoring results in a perfect square, and then you just combine your numbers back here, so minus 9. So this is our problem. Now, sometimes it's equal to y or f of x. The reason you do this, there's really no telling. You might have been asked to find the vertex, and if you were looking for the vertex, it would be the opposite of what's in the parentheses, and then exactly what is at the back. So notice I changed the minus 2 to a 2, but I kept the minus 9 a minus 9. You might also be asked to solve. So if your question or your teacher had asked you to solve, that would mean this was actually equal to 0. And if it was a solve problem, then you would go about trying to get x by itself. So you could add 9 to both sides. After you add the 9 to both sides, you need to get rid of that squared. So we would be taking a square root of both sides. Don't forget, when you take a square root, you need the plus or minus. Now, the square root of 9 is just 3, so I'm going to have a plus or minus 3 equals an x minus 2. Now, we're almost there. How do we get that x by itself? Well, we just add 2 to both sides. Now, this is where you need to be careful. I've got a plus or minus in front of that 3, so make sure that you do 2 problems here. We need to do positive 3 plus the 2, but then we also need to do the negative 3 plus the 2, and those are going to be my 2 answers. So 5 and negative 1 will be my x's. So like I said, I'm not sure what you're being asked, but this is how you complete the square to get there. Let's do one more harder example. Now, the only thing that makes these harder, in my opinion, is kind of like what I'm giving you right here. Something with a coefficient. So we're going to start this problem the same way. We are just going to scoot the 1 over. Okay, now once we do that, I had told you we want to make sure there's no number in front of this x squared. So what we're going to do is factor out the negative 2 from both of these terms. I'm still going to have the plus 1 chilling at the back though. Don't mess with that, okay? So take out a negative 2 from a positive 12. Let's see, if you do that division, you'll have a minus 6. Now we're ready for the box, okay? What am I going to put in that missing space? Well, half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So we're going to have a plus 9 right here. Now remember, whatever you do here, you're going to do the opposite back here, okay? So this is where it's a little tricky, because if you put a minus 9, you're actually wrong. We did not just add a 9 to this problem. This 9 has a negative 2 in the front of the parentheses, which directly affects it. So in reality, what we just did was we added a 9 times a negative 2. So at the back, I need to subtract a 9 times a negative 2. So don't forget, whatever goes here, it's still here in the back. We did the opposite, so this was a plus, so I put a minus. This was a 9, so I put a 9. But if there was a coefficient in the front of those parentheses, you better also have that at the back. Now we're ready to recopy. Bring down the negative 2. Factor this, so it's going to become x, what's half of the middle, minus 3 squared, and then do the numbers in the back. I've got 1 minus a negative 18. That's the same thing as 1 plus positive 18. So this is your completing the square. If they asked for the vertex, it would be positive 3, positive 19. And I'm going to not solve this, but if you needed to solve it, you'd put a 0 here, move the 19 over, and it would become a really, really ugly answer. But that's how this works. Hopefully that helped. Talk to you soon.